Hello, and welcome to Roll for Resilience. This is a podcast fusing the idea that our role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy can be utilized and fostered for personal growth and mental health. I'm your host, Vector of Change. My pronouns are he, they. Our very first episode of the podcast is dedicated to a pressing concern, which is the genocide currently underway in Israeli occupied areas of Palestine, notably the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. As of the recording of this episode, more than 105 days have passed since October 7th, and the Israeli military forces have been decimating the area. Join me and our special guests as we delve into the historical context of this conflict, discuss some of the recent updates of loss, share some personal accounts, and offer recommendations on what we can do to make a difference. Please be advised that this episode of Roll for Resilience includes contents, discussions, and materials related to genocide, acts of war, discrimination, religious persecution, and trauma. Please take breaks as needed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Hi, y'all. Anyway, Raiders, if you don't know me, I'm a Factor of Change. You can call me AOC. My pronouns are he, they. I am a cozy queer RPG streamer. We are doing our first episode of a very special podcast called Roll for Resilience. Tonight's episode is all about Palestine and supporting folks. We are raising funds for the Palestinian Children's Fund. Here is a link. So we're going to talk about all sorts of things. I've got some really awesome guests. They are here. They are so happy to vibe with us. I am the host for this panel, joined by lots of really cool, awesome friends. We're going to just go a little bit one by one, introduce ourselves. What's your name? What's your pronoun? And something about interested you in joining this panel. And I guess we'll start at the top here with my teammate, Captain Stickfigure.
Hi, yeah, I'm Captain Stickfigure, fellow Treppy. I'm mostly, my pronouns are they, he, please. And I mostly am streaming gaming, but I do follow politics quite closely. So I'm excited to have a chat tonight. And I was most excited to take part in this discussion because it's really something that a situation that I've had a little bit of a complicated relationship with, and I haven't been fully engaging as much as maybe I should, and I'm looking forward to hopefully learning something and gaining some further insight from some folks who are a little bit more connected and familiar. So thank you.
Then moving across the aisle, we've got Crimson Ooze, one of my oldest
Hi.
internet pals.
I know, we've been like friends forever. I am Crimson News. My name is Mia. I go by she, her. I am half Palestinian. It's one of the major reasons, obviously, for me talking about what's going on in Palestine and the people and what's going on currently. And it really ties into my current advocacy. I'm here with a couple of other friends that I really love, and I'm very happy to meet more speakers that are interested in speaking on the topic and sharing what we know with you guys, because I know there are a lot of other platforms that are sharing this information, and we'd like to spread the word.
Excellent. Thanks, Mia. And then down below me, a new friend from the land of TikTok. Hello.
Hey everybody, my name is Dan. I go by Hipster Genius on TikTok, and I decided to get involved in this discussion because I've been involved in international relations and specifically the occupation of Palestine for close to 30 years now, and I'm only 37. And I've said this on other platforms, but I can remember being 7 years old and watching then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and his awkward handshake on the south lawn of the White House with President Bill Clinton and then PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat. And I just think it's something that doesn't nearly get discussed enough. And I'm happy to be a part of the discussion. Oh, and my pronouns are he, him.
Thank you. Thank you. And then to our new friend's right is the illustrious Lana Kane.
Ooh, what an intro. Hi guys, my name is Lana Kane. My pronouns are she, her. I am interested in this topic because I am someone who because I exist will forever be in the conversation of politics just because of who I exist as in the United States, a Black queer woman. So it's always going to be something that I have to figure out here. And I think it's important that especially those who are always trying to find their place in their own home country should listen and hear the stories of those around the world who are trying to do the same. Um, it shocks me how a lot of people allow for fear to be an excuse for lack of empathy. And I think that maybe the cause of that is because they don't have the knowledge that they do. So if I can be um, maybe someone that can just continue to gather more information, because I don't know everything. I have no idea how anything can be solved in the sense of a lot of people around me. But I think that my empathy and my um my desire to want to just make things better for anyone, because I would hate for anyone to feel even a sliver of what I felt in a place that's supposed to be free. Um, should mean something, if nothing at all. So I'm not a perfect person, and I certainly don't know all the ways to fix things, but I want to learn and I want to be somewhere where I can continue to learn more and also help those who need to be defended in the same way I would hope that someone would do it for me.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you, Lana. And then to Lana's right, we have Nancy Naveen, another new friend I've met on TikTok. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. I'm Nancy. I go by Nancy Naveen. She, her. I've always been passionate about justice and liberation for everyone. My blood has always boiled for people, animals, anything that is oppressed, anyone and anything that is bullied. Blood has always boiled for that. But I do have a connection to Palestine. I am Palestinian. I'm one of the ethnic minorities of Palestine. And my family, thank God, was safe, but we were affected. Properties were stolen in 1948, and I have a bunch of stories. But Palestine is near and dear to my heart. And I have been speaking on this every single day since, the world began on October 7th. The sarcasm. Yeah, that's about it for now.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everybody, for being here and, contributing to this conversation. Again, this is just kind of a chill talk. I've sat on a panel or two of yours, Nancy, and you kind of have a similar vibe, so I love that.
Thank you, by the way. Thank you for being there and hanging out yesterday. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my goal is to really just kind of have a conversation, give a little bit of knowledge out on Twitch into the world about Palestine, its history. I've got a little video I'd like us to watch, not of like what's happening right now. I don't think that would be the best for Twitch. But there's a cooking show where Anthony Bourdain went to Jerusalem.
Yes.
And is on the ground, and you can kind of see from like the year 2016, I think is when that was filmed.
2013.
2013. What was on the ground then? And then think about perhaps what is going on now. That this is not a new problem. This is not since October 7th. This is an issue that has been a big problem for a long time. And then by the end of our panel tonight, I'd like for us to just have some ideas together about what we can do to boycott, to educate, to protest, to divest. What can we do to stop the nonsense of bloodshed that's now, I think, 105 days since October 7th, I believe? It's been going on and on and on. With that, why don't we talk a little bit about how Israel came to be. I was doing a little bit of research on the topic, and I was finding that in 1799, our good old pal Napoleon was, invading the Arab world and came up with this wonderful idea that he thought there should be a Jewish state in the Middle East. He was thinking that that was probably the best plan for the Jewish problem at the time, because as you know, Jewish people have also been marginalized throughout our world's history in all sorts of forms and fashion. And so that was the solution. And that's kind of the beginnings, I think, of this idea of Zionism. To me, I guess Zionism is a settler colonial project that has been carried forward by Israel. It's the idea of manufacturing a Jewish majority by removing the native Palestinians and replacing them. It's a political ideology all about establishing and maintaining that Jewish demographic majority here. Not here, there, obviously. And it's been brewing for a long time. In 1917, there was the Balfour Declaration. So back in the 20th century, obviously, Britain and the Netherlands and all of these superpowers of Europe have really divided up the world. Right. So we had like all of this chaos of colonialism going on in the world, right? Europe was dividing up and pocketing the monies of indigenous peoples all around the planet. Slavery was abound. Like, this is how the world's economy really became to be. And then in World War I, there was the Allied powers, right? Versus Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Right? So they lost, and the Ottoman Empire at the time, which encompassed a huge area of, Northern Africa and the Middle East, that kind of region, kind of fell apart. And they had to figure out what to do with all of that land. And Britain in 1917 had the Balfour Declaration, where they basically said, without really having permission, we're just gonna take this little area called Palestine, and we're going to turn that into Israel. We're going to turn that into a Jewish state, even though they really didn't have the legal authority to do it. They just decided on a whim, this is fine. This is cool. Jews constituted less than 10% of the population at the time, but with British assistance, European Jews immigrated into that area between 1922 and 1935, slowly becoming about 27% of that area's population.
Wow.
When the Nazis seized power in Germany between 1933 and 1936, between 30 and 60,000 more European Jews arrived on the shores of Palestine. One of the reasons for the Balfour Declaration to keep, things under tabs in that area is, Palestine is pretty darn close to Egypt. It's pretty darn close to that Suez Canal. It's a place where a lot of money, a lot of goods get transported. Why not have some kind of a sphere of influence in that region, right?
Sorry, I just want to mention something real quick.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the Balfour Declaration, but it's important to mention that about 20 years before the Balfour Declaration, a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, who is considered to be the father of modern Zionism, he wrote a book called Judenstaat, which roughly translates in English to Jewish state. And that was the first initial outline of a need for a Jewish state in Palestine. I want to say that was 1895, if I remember correctly.
That Zionist thing, goal, whatever it is, the crimes that it's created, it's been around a long time. The idea's been around a long time. And the Balfour Declaration was something that legitimized this plan and allowed that to continue to grow. In 1936, there was an event that was a general strike that became known as the Arab Revolt. There was an armed resistance to Palestine being carved up. They didn't like the idea of their homeland being taken away and stripped and stolen. There was a large uprising against the British and their support of the Zionist settler colonialism. British authorities, of course, crushed the revolt. Lasted for about 3 years violently. They destroyed at the time about 2,000 Palestinian homes. Another 9,000 Palestinians were put in concentration camps and subjected to violent interrogation, including torture. And about 200 of Palestine's nationalist leaders were also interrogated. At the time, about 10% of the Palestinian male population had been killed, wounded, exiled, or imprisoned by the end of the revolt. So this pushback, right? This is before Israel existed. They were already coming in to kind of do what they could to destroy the people who were living there, to destroy the land and give it away as if it was land to give, not too dissimilar from what happened in the United States. I've had conversations before on my stream about the Sullivan-Clinton campaign. It's a part of New York State history that we don't really talk about very much. During the Revolutionary War, there was two generals, Sullivan and Clinton, who were working for President Washington, or I guess General Washington at the time, right? And so while they were fighting the British to kind of take our land, they sent these generals into upstate New York to destroy homes, to burn villages, and to chase as many people as they could across the border. As a result of that, and the following winter, it was one of the worst winters we've ever had. So many people died of starvation because they ruined their crops. They destroyed the food that they could eat. They destroyed their homes. And then all of that land in upstate New York, where I am from, is what was given to the generals as their payment for serving in the Revolutionary War. Like the counties that I know and grew up near are all named for these awful men who did just those things. So this history that we're talking about is not unique to Palestine. This is a strategy. This is a strategy that's been used all over the world.
It's a tactic of colonialism.
It is. It is. Then there was the Nakba. Between 1947 and 1949, at least 750,000 Palestinians from about a 1.3 million population were made refugees beyond the borders of the state. Zionist forces took more than 78% of historic Palestine, ethnically cleansed and destroyed about 530 villages and cities, killing 15,000 Palestinians in a series of mass atrocities, including more than 70 massacres. By the end of the fighting, the end of the Nakba, Israel controlled about 78% of what historically had been Palestine. Millions of folks are still refugees, right? That event has continued to echo forward. Many people have been displaced as a result of this moment. Israel's divided two major zones, I believe, for Palestinians. There's the Gaza Strip, and then there's the West Bank, which is closer to Jerusalem. The stuff that we're going to talk about now really does apply to, Gaza and the Strip there and what they're doing. But as I was listening to Mia share some updates, there's a lot of the same stuff happening in the West Bank. It's all of the area. Yeah. It's not just Gaza that's experiencing these awful atrocities.
So, yeah, a lot of the eyes are on Gaza right now. But we should never, ever forget about West Bank, because they are suffering from a lot of violence, a lot of tragedy right now. And it kind of, I wouldn't say happens behind the scenes because a lot of us see it, but it gets overlooked because the focus is on Gaza right now. But we should acknowledge that all Palestinians not only come from Gaza, but they also come from the West Bank.
Another major setback that I noted in doing a little bit of research in 1967, there was the Arab-Israeli War, known as the Nakba. Israel continued to occupy a lot of the remaining territories that were in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip that it continues to occupy in some ways until today. The UN partition plan for Israel was supposed to be about 55% of how much of that territory should be under Israel's control, but it currently holds more than 85% of historic Palestine within its grasp. This conflict in the 60s led to the further displacement of another 430,000 Palestinians, half of which originated from areas occupied in 1948. And so these were twice refugees. They went through this experience double times in their life. As in the Nakba, again, Israeli forces used military tactics that violated basic international rights laws, such as attacks on civilians and expulsions. Many refugees at that time fled into neighboring Jordan, some going to Egypt, some going to Syria. The folks that stayed behind, that were able to survive through that experience, they remained under martial law for 2 decades. More than 50 laws exist currently in Israel that actively discriminate anyone for not being Jewish, often denying adequate food, water, and electricity. Another footnote that I discovered is that, the United States continues to give billions in dollars every year to Israel, amounting to at least $10 million every day to continue to support the Zionist approaches. I've got some more notes here there, but just kind of giving that context that, we hear about the conflict in Israel and Gaza, right? Or conflict with Hamas, in Israel. This is not new. This is not a conflict that just sprang up out of nowhere. This is just history repeating itself over and over and over again. That's just kind of, I guess, the basic context I want to give folks, is that what we're hearing now is just a new version of the same plan. When they're destroying olive trees, when they're kicking people out of their homes, when they're destroying houses or targeting ambulance drivers, it's all for the same purpose. It's all for the same reason. It's genocide. There's no real other word I can use to describe these experiences of folks. So I'm an ally. I'm not Palestinian. I haven't had family heritage that comes from this region. So I'm just sharing what I've been learning as somebody who's really interested in knowing what's happening.
I know that, you're not necessarily Palestinian, Anthony, but you are one of my fond friends and advocate. And I just want to say he was one of the first people I really shared my story to publicly, like over 15 years ago. And I was really honored because he asked me to speak when he was writing his paper for school. And I always remember that. So, just to attest to his interest in people and caring about people, it is absolutely genuine. So I just want to reinforce his credibility here.
You're very sweet. You're very sweet, mate. Yes. I can't remember exactly what the paper was, but I had to write something, and I was like, I have someone who has the most beautiful life experience that's very different from my own. I'm gonna talk to Mia. I'm like, hey, do you wanna have a conversation? I'd love to learn more about your life.
I know.
I love that. I feel that humans need to do that more. We really need to take interest in each other and each other's stories, and help each other and support each other and back each other up, and pass on information. And that interconnectedness and that support is what really is going to revive humanity. And I love hearing that about you too.
Yeah,
It's really sweet.
I was lucky enough. I was lucky enough to meet Nancy this past Saturday, because we were 2 of the 400,000 people that took to the streets of Washington, D.C. to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. And it's kind of the same thing, it's one thing to, know people, very superficially on any social media platform, whether it's here on Twitch or TikTok or Facebook or Twitter. But it's another thing entirely, to be boots on the ground, marching for the same cause.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Another sweet soul. Really, I appreciate you. I've said this before, we need all hands on deck. You don't have to be Palestinian. This is about human rights. This is about humanity. And it doesn't stop with Palestine. There's issues in the Congo as well, and Sudan, and additional places in the world. And so, you don't have to be from that place to stand up, speak up, to march, to protest, to take action. In fact, we need
Thank
people
you.
all over the world, all hands on deck. So I appreciate you. It was really nice meeting you. And we've been kind of connected since on
Yeah.
TikTok and stuff. So I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely a benefit of being in today's world is, this technology stuff. It kind of brings us together, it
Absolutely.
connects us, despite all its evils.
Yeah.
I just would add to
Yeah,
what Nancy said
agreed.
is just, the liberation of Palestine is like a key to liberating the rest of the world,
Yes.
honestly, because we need to share our humanity across the board. Not one person is more than the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, as a professional, I'm a social worker, right? That's what I do. I so agree. One group's plight is every group's plight, and I think it's important that we raise up every voice we can. Atrocities are atrocities. It doesn't matter where in the world it's happening or who it's happening to. It's unacceptable. Unacceptable. For the viewers at home, our panel watched a episode of Parts Unknown, Season 2, Episode 1, Jerusalem. It's a documentary series that Anthony Bourdain put together, and we watch his reactions to being there in 2013. I will leave a link in the show notes below. You are welcome to go watch that yourself. It is on YouTube. It is an excellent video. Just kind of a window into the scene of what we're talking about. And imagine the conditions that are probably in Gaza are probably worse than what we're seeing here. And it's not a pretty video in terms of some of the content that we're going to see. I thought it would be interesting for us to go back to 2013 and see what was going on. What was going on in Israel? What was going on in Gaza? What was going on in the West Bank? Obviously, this is a television show. It is manicured. It is curated. You're only going to see what they choose to show you. Those border crossings are not that nice. I could imagine. I've seen some other footage of what it looks like. I guess a question I want to put out to the panel. What are you feeling right now?
Oh, I think after everything that I know, that's not even the tip of the iceberg, but it's like a peek through a crack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. It is a peek through the crack. Yeah.
I said it in the Twitch stream chat, but with that being over a decade ago now, I can't help but wonder if any of the Palestinians that Anthony Bourdain interviewed, if they've survived the last 105 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else felt that, but I think that it crossed my mind as well.
Yep.
I do that with a lot of things that I see that are older now.
I feel weird. Weird in the sense of I consider myself to be a Christian with a brain, aka love Jesus, that's my homeboy, but science exists. And I be queer AF. So it it's saddening in the sense that I feel like the number one thing that everyone, even those who aren't Christians, and maybe this is me being super emotional or basic, so forgive me, but the number one thing that people expect for people who believe in Jesus and his people, the Jewish people, that Jesus is love. And how can you be so ugly to creations that you believe he created and he wanted to live on this planet for whatever those reasons may be, and then expect to, on the other end, because you believe in heaven and hell, that when you get to heaven, if you get to heaven, that this isn't going to come up, that your savior, this person that you are killing people in the name of for whatever that reason may be, that he's going to be okay with that, because he's not. that's not, I mean, it's legitimately, and I'm rusty, do not get me wrong, it's been a while since I've been
No,
to church.
but those are definitely valid things to say and valid things to feel, especially being raised in the Christian religion. I mean, I didn't say anything before, but I was raised around Christianity most of my life. I don't consider myself one. I don't consider myself Muslim either, but I have seen both sides of the fence, and I have seen exactly what you're questioning and why. And you wonder, how can you do all this and expect at the end, this is going to be cool with your J-man?
Right. Like they're totally
Yeah.
cool with this. They're so down for like it just that, and it's I almost wish we could do a psychological study on. You can tell. I think that I don't know who in chat who mentioned it. When somebody mentioned that the answers were rehearsed when Anthony Bourdain was asking the
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
yes,
The guys that
yes.
say that, those responses are basically rehearsed. You can hear those kinds of responses from almost anyone from there, anyone who supports that has the Zionist ideology. And I know at least a couple of us are very well aware of it because we encounter it every single day.
Every day.
Every day.
It's clearly a coping mechanism. And I get it. I don't think that a lot of people over there, whether they're pulling a trigger or supporting someone that may or may not be doing that, would be able to sleep at night if they had to legitimately see the real actions of what it is that they are co-signing. I get it. You're like, it's easier to think, oh yeah, it was definitely a kid. It was a kid. Oh, well, we didn't paint it over because, oh, that's a great idea. Good point.
That's a
The
great
minute
idea,
that
but they were going to leave that up, and you know why they were going to leave that up.
you know exactly why they're going to leave it up. It's like the delusion is it's astounding. It's sad. It's a clear indication of, it's kind of like with children. I coach for 10 years, and my mom has worked with children for 30. So there's something that children do specifically when they know that they are very wrong. They know that what they're doing is not right. They know that they're going to get in trouble for what they're doing, where they essentially go, well, before they can accept the guilt or admit to what it is that they did, they'll skip over the admission and they'll go, coach, well, sorry, that happened, but it was because, and they try to essentially justify their action before actually processing and discussing the action in which they're trying to justify, to try and jump ahead of dealing with the negative of the issue. And I used to I'm like, before you say anything, you can go ahead and run and think about it. Like that was, I had other things, but it's human nature. In one of the worst ways. I'm kind of just flabbergasted. And it's sad that this was only 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And I don't want to freak anyone out, but there are some echoes to this that I feel are very similar to things that are certainly happening with religion and religion control here.
That is
You know what I mean?
definitely relevant. We've talked about it before, and it is relevant.
It's very relevant.
So sorry. So you had mentioned a factor about only seeing what they want you to see. Just in diving in more into the censorship and suppression that the Israeli government puts into the media, I would not be surprised if CNN had to give that to
You have to pass it through.
Yeah, so the Israeli government has people who work for them whose job is to go through any media that talks about the state of Israel, and they will censor it. So I would not be surprised.
Goes through filtration before anything goes through to the screens.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised when during the falafel scene in the beginning, when he used the phrase food appropriation. And he talked about how when it comes to falafel, it's like it's almost like a chicken and the egg situation. Like no one knows where it came from. The fact that he acknowledged that, I'll be honest, my first thought was, oh man, the Israeli censor must have been flipping on that one to let that through.
Well, I imagine the production on all of this must have been very hellacious, to say the least, in order to get what he had shown.
Yeah, but it's still that point you made that this is just like a peek, through the
Oh yeah.
fence, right? And even still, just having that little peek, you're getting the vibe. To me, that scene when he's in the settler's house and he like resorts to like robotic Zionist mode and like starts repeating,
Yes.
the script, you could see like the shift in his posture and his body language.
Yes.
That's funny
I
you say the word script.
It's a script.
It's absolutely a script. And
It
if you
is.
don't know, the script has a name, and it's called the Hasbara Handbook. And they teach them to use that when they're talking about Israel, to paint it in a better light so they don't have as much opposition to what they do.
They literally just give them a handbook. Here you go. Here's what you say. Wow, that's
They do.
incredible.
I mean, what they're saying, it creeps me out how colonized they're so happy we're here, we're just
We're,
making things so much better. Things have been so much more prosperous since we've gotten here.
we're just living on
But
a
we
mountain
won't go
nobody
eat
wanted
with
to live
them.
on. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no one wanted to live here. Nobody was here, and like, and then but
Well,
we don't eat with
clearly
them. We
people
don't we
were
don't eat with them
there,
either. Like,
right?
it's ooh, it is psychological war. Ooh, it's yeah, it's
Yeah, I
that's
mean that's why when the one scene when Anthony Bourdain was talking about, they showed all the houses in the West Bank, flying the Israeli flag. And if I remember correctly, he said that I think he said that they had been purchased. And
No.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, nah, that's some of that playbook in action. They weren't purchased, they were
mhm,
stolen. Let's call it what
stolen.
it is.
Yeah, yeah, they were taken. They
They
were taken.
Christopher Columbus the heck out of those houses. They sure did.
Yeah.
They did. They did. Wow.
So I guess what I was gonna say is like seeing that shift in the body language and the script that came out of the settler, it reminded me so much of like I've worked with a lot of LGBT folks in the therapy side of my life, and like when people have families that are fundamentalist Christians, they do the same
Mhm.
thing. They have
Yes, they
like
do.
Yep.
their own little scripts of
Yes, they
things that
do.
they say, and it's so
Yes,
culty. It's so culty.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's funny that you mentioned fundamentalist Christians because ironically enough, the majority of Zionists in the United States aren't Jewish. They're evangelical
Chris- They're
Christians.
Of course they
Christians.
are.
They're
Yeah.
they're evangelical, and it's
They
a that.
are.
I mean, I won't get into that, but I do. Well, you know what? No, I will. I will go ahead and say it. It's 1,000% It's race related. It is 1,000% race related. Sorry,
Yes.
Yep.
guys. I don't want to. I
No,
Yes.
don't want
no,
to.
don't be sorry, because I would have said the same exact thing.
It is white people who are Christians seeing the people of God who are Jewish in their mind and idealistically, like, oh no, those are Jesus's people who also happen to be fair skinned and they live like us. So therefore, I'm concerned. Darn those dark skinned Palestinians. It's a lot of
The
that.
mental
It's a ton of
gymnastics.
that. It's
Yeah,
just
I grew up
it's
around that. So I would echo that. And especially because I grew up with my mother's side of the family. They are white people.
mhm.
And I am the not so white person. So if you really think about that, I have always been acutely aware of my place and the way that they behave. And the realization that uh, they're comfortable with you until you start uh, showing signs that you're not like taking all the
Mhm.
brainwashing in.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Or when they realize how not white culturally in their mind they might think that they are in similarity to them, when they come
Hmm.
over here, because this is where it's safe for them, is what they'll say, and then they go, "Oh, you're not white at all. You're not like me at all. Like you're in their dumb
Yeah.
American brain. Oh my God, like you're actually like from the Middle East. Whoa, which I mean, there's so many layers to like the manipulation
Yeah.
here and how the real reaction of, I think like I don't think, I'm so sorry. It makes me really upset that a lot of the majority of older Americans, and I'm only saying older Americans because I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but as someone who's been in marketing and social media as their day job for like 14 years, the majority of people who are digesting any type of information from just their televisions or from the basic news sources are between the age range of like, I want to say 35 to 65. And I think the millennial age to like the beginning of the Gen X, we actually derive the majority of our information from a mixed sources of online sources as well as whatever we get in the media, not just from our country. We actually do seek sources from different country for our news sources. A lot of Americans do not do that. And so I remember having those conversations with both of my parents, and I think they're both very different and similar in a lot of ways. And I had to like, tell my dad, like, you need to look at these other sources. You need to check this out because you're a smart man and you already can tell something is up by the amount of all of the sudden since October 7th,
Right.
Israel media, Jewish media, which is crazy because to be non-Israel does not mean that you are anti-Jew. Let's make that real clear.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
it is not even remotely the same. But that is America's angle right now, and they are trying to use that to really almost guilt people into seeing things in this way for whatever deal that they've made with whoever is in charge at the top. It is propaganda all day, and it's
Oh,
interesting to
yeah.
see the news sources and the newscasters that go against that get fired, get moved around, get silenced. I know there's one guy that actually called out a person from one of the representatives from Israel on his show on CNN. He got fired, and now he works for Al Jazeera. Like,
Mhm.
what is
And
going
not
on?
only in the news media, look at our celebrity media.
Yes,
Look how many
what is
people who are
going on?
speaking for Israel versus
Mhm.
how many people and how long it took for some people to actually say something for Palestine. And why is that?
It's because we're
Right?
not stupid, and they're being forced to have to actually listen to the other side because we have our own source of media without celebrities, and they thought they could make us think like that, and we're like, "No, honey, we're talking to each other. We know what's going on." And now they're like
Not
stuck
only that, it's
having to
this.
circle back.
Not only that, it's this.
Yeah.
This
Oh
is
yeah.
Yeah.
heavily,
Oh yeah.
heavily tied in to what talks and what doesn't go.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge with, or I guess not really a challenge, but part of like the strategy, right, in order to convince people to not stick their nose in the business of what's happening in Israel or Palestine, is they just had to get people neutral. They just had to get people to go to, I don't care. It's too complex. It's not a big
Yes.
deal, right?
It
Absolutely.
really isn't, though. That's the funny
No,
thing. It really
it's
isn't.
really not.
Yeah, and that's why it blew my mind when I learned not that long ago that DJ Khaled. I always knew he was Arab, but he's Palestinian, and
Yeah.
he has been silent
I
for
feel
the
that,
last
but
105 days.
Mm.
And
Because of
now they're
money.
getting
Yep.
and now they're getting on him because he's been posting to Insta. There's been multiple posts that he's put on Instagram where he's drinking Starbucks, and Starbucks is like one of, if not the number one company in the boycott movement.
Pretty bad.
Like, yeah.
I do have to say I have a different perspective than I think most people when it comes to celebrities and anyone that's on social media when it comes to speaking out. I do think it's true that there are certain celebrities that definitely need to open their mouth. DJ Khaled, that's
Mhm.
dumb. You know better. Come on now. Like, that is your home state. That is your lineage. Like, there's so much more behind that. He sold his soul.
He sold his soul. He's probably it's money selling your soul, but also
1,000%.
intimidation. It could very well be that they're intimidating him. We're gonna if you say anything, there's a lot involved. I'm
100%.
not defending him, but I'm just saying
Mhm.
At the end of the day is, do you stand on your integrity or do you stand on protecting yourself?
he does not.
100%. I agree with when it comes to him. But personally, I already don't give a shit what's her name? Carly D'Amelio. What's her name? Whoever. A lot of people are
I don't know. I'm bad with celebrities and names. I've never been into them. So I'm glad to see
Yeah.
people like
Yeah.
denounce, like, oh, I'm not following celebrities anymore. I'm like, yes, I never did.
Yeah, I went through a whole
Yes.
period where I was like, oh, you're not think, and just chuck them out because I was like, okay, I don't need that because I'm
well,
focused.
they're
I don't
also
need the distraction.
that's not what they're gonna do.
I always knew about their
Yeah,
connection with the
of
powers that
course.
be, and like I was just not into it. I mean, I'll watch a movie here and there if somebody recommends it, but I have never, and I'm glad to see people waking up to the truth about that whole industry and all the actors. You know who you should be praising is the press in
Mm,
Yeah.
Gaza, the
yes.
journalists in Gaza. Human beings that are doing good things out there, activists. Those are the people that you should be following and praising. And I'm glad to see this whole like Hollywood thing kind of crumbling a little bit.
100%. It is.
It's
Because
refreshing.
also
Yeah.
and this is what I was circling back
It's
to, they're not
refreshing.
gonna change anything. I'm so sorry. You can keep tweeting at someone, you can keep, like, getting angry at them, "Oh, I'm upset you won't speak up." Why? What are they gonna do? They haven't done anything before, they don't have the power for the most part to do anything. As an American who has been through a lot of shit in America as a person, and they didn't do anything for the stuff happening directly in front of them, we're not celebrities aren't gonna do for something for someone that's not in their own yard. And I wish that we could take that energy and that anger, because I think it is easy to blame people that are right in front of us that we don't have an opportunity that maybe we do. Okay, so then what can we do? Who do we need to contact? Where do we
Mhm,
need to make
mhm.
the phone calls to? Who do we actually like do something with? Like, why aren't you calling your senators? Why aren't you trying to set up a protest? Why aren't we donating? There are other ways that can go? It just, I will never understand personally getting angry with people who they can't do anything. I guess I get it from this.
Well, they can't do anything, but I think it's the reach that they
Yeah,
have, because if a celebrity has 5 million followers and they start sharing information, that's going to reach a lot of people. So there's power in that. But in terms of actually them
Yes,
actually being able to change something directly, no, they don't. They're not at the top there. But they have a large reach because everybody has always worshipped, praised
mhm,
celebrities. So you got 100 million people following some
hmm,
Kardashian or whatever. And if that person were to speak up, it would reach a lot of people. And there's power in that. And so people are getting frustrated, like, you can educate so many people. This is so important. Like, why are you silent? So I understand the frustration and the anger
I
in
think
that
it's
sense,
also
because it can be very
status can
powerful
help
for
put
people like that to
pressure in
reach out.
certain directions if they know how
yes.
to use it.
Yes.
If they
If
know
they
how to
know how
use
to
it.
use it. If they know how to
Yeah.
use it.
That's
Yeah.
why I have so much respect for, the Hadid family. Their father, I mean, they're half Palestinian. Their father's Palestinian. And they've basically said, screw our celebrity. We're going to be out in the street marching for our people. And I, for one, I've never really understood, the cult of celebrity in the United States. It's always been weird to me.
It's so weird.
Parasocial.
It's so parasocial, it's so weird.
Yeah. And like
I get
Nancy
admiring someone. I do.
Yeah,
I do get
and like
admiring
Nancy
someone.
said, the people that I really admire, are, the Motazes and the Bisons and
Oh,
the Wael
Bisan.
El Dadu that are risking their lives every day to get the truth out there. That is more important than any movie that any of these celebrities in Hollywood could release, any song that DJ
Yes,
Khaled could put
I
out.
agree. I agree. I agree.
So I do want to check in. There was a comment, Captain Stick Figure, that you made that watching that video, you were learning a lot. So I was just curious if you could share with us a little bit of what was really resonating with you there.
Kind of all of it. This is sort of, I think it's safe to say, the first glimpse into like Palestinian culture that I've experienced. Like, so it was fascinating to me to see not only their amazing looking food, but just the way that they live in the situation that they've sort of been put
Yeah.
in, right? Um, and every facet of that is fascinating to me. The relationship that, you know, sort of these regular people have with, you know, their situation and with the confrontation with Israel and the situation, the circumstances of their lives and the things that they celebrate and how um, sort of I think unfortunately, but also inspiringly casual they are about some of these situations. Like it's really amazing how people are thriving and have, as
When
you,
you have to live with that every day, you eventually get a little bit conditioned.
You get
It's their life.
desensitized.
That's their
yeah,
everyday
right,
life after a while.
absolutely, and as you said, as many people have said, that documentary is very well manicured. So there's obviously a lot of other situations that we are not seeing. The children's theater segment got to me. I found that very poignant. With that individual talking about how, despite a lot of the murals depicting, uh, you know, activists and
Yeah.
or not
If you look
activists, but
through,
you know, more like violent confrontation, I guess, aspect of it, but how the kids are more interested in art and culture
if you go
than
to
they are
Google, you can
in
look
that.
up like a lot of the graffiti that has been put up that depicts a lot of different movements and things throughout time. For example, if you look up the wall graffiti in relation to like the Black Lives Matter movement, you will see
Mhm.
a lot there. And they were tied together. Around that time, the Palestinians were reaching out during the movement for the protests when people were getting pepper sprayed and attacked and how to defend themselves. Um, and so they, in turn, were creating art and supporting the movement because they understood. And a lot of the techniques that the police were utilizing at that time were taught from Israel.
I would highly recommend reading a great book by Angela Davis. It's called Freedom is a Constant Struggle. And it dives deeper into that connection between between the movement for Palestinian liberation and the Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States.
I think another thing that really stuck out to me, sort of holistically, is that really have, um, I don't have any, at least not that I am aware of, any Palestinian people in my sphere. I do have Arab people in my sphere, and they have spoken out. I also have Jewish people in my sphere closer in my sphere. So I've seen their opinions a lot, and I've seen how they feel. And I have an acquaintance who just went to Israel and volunteered and had, you know, very uh, interesting stories that were very nice and inspiring, and also very unfortunate and saddening. Um, but the having that more of that perspective, it's interesting to see sort of the other side,
Yeah.
right? I remember I'm 40. I was in middle school in 1997 in social studies class learning about Israel and Palestine and that conflict and how old it was then and how there was just shrugs all around for what the solution would be. And to see that all that time has gone by and
Mm.
nothing has changed is really
Yeah.
depressing. But also, yeah, again, I feel like just like you were saying, like many of you were saying, just being an American and particularly being a white American, uh, I feel like the perspective that I'm forced into is the Israeli perspective.
100%.
And which is not to say that that there aren't aspects of that perspective that I can appreciate, but it's so
Yeah.
weighted.
I can see that. Having been raised with my, like I said, my mother's family, had I not really had an opportunity to really get to embrace and understand and teach myself what I did, I would have been in the same situation of having that skewed perspective. And to me, that's even heavier because knowing what I am now and having those ideas would have been continually pushed on me. And then a lot of when this started, I realized the more that I spoke up, the more that I stuck out,
Yep.
Mm.
hmm
the less that I was a desirable person to kind of speak to or
hmm
engage with.
I remember seeing, Mia, you posted on Facebook about that
Oh yeah,
change.
I
I
posted a
remember.
lot.
Oh,
I posted like every single day. I
yeah.
think Anthony has probably seen almost everything. Yeah, I was really angry. I felt a lot of anger and betrayal because despite the whiteness in my family, I thought that they would have taken the time to acknowledge that all of this would have affected me deeply.
hmm
That at the end of the day, where were they to check on me? Where
Yeah.
were they to echo and support and solidarity? I don't have an answer to that. It's 105 days. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I think, and this is just my opinion, yeah, we saw it as a country a lot, with the Black Lives Matter protests and things like that. But I think it's just it's a combination of white privilege and ignorance in the truest sense of the word. Because because then to your point, Captain Stickfigure, you mentioned how like you're 40 and you have been kind of, conditioned to believe the Israeli perspective, as you put it. I mean, that didn't just start in the 90s. That goes all the way back to the formation of the State of Israel in 1948. I mean, the United States was the first Western country to recognize the state of Israel. And then in the early 1950s, there was an organization, I believe it was called the Zionist American Public Affairs Committee, I believe. And then that morphed into what we now know as AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. And they are responsible for basically controlling our elected officials. There are various websites you can go to where you can see how much money they have given to our federal officials, but they also give money to our state officials too. And that's where you see a lot of the, I don't want to say whitewashing, but it's really the best term I can come up with. And where you see a lot of that and pushing the Israeli agenda. I mean, we were talking earlier about the House resolution that passed back in November, basically saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. But what a lot of people don't know is right after that resolution was passed, there was a law that had passed the House of Representatives, and I don't know if it passed the United States Senate or not, where they basically told the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, which are the two governing bodies in the occupied territories. The Palestinian Authority is the governing body in the West Bank, and Hamas is the governing body in the Gaza Strip. They basically wanted to pass a law that said, hey, we're going to send in State Department officials to look at your education curriculum every year, and then we are going to write a report and tell you how you can make it more Israel friendly.
Mm.
And that's like, yeah,
That's wild.
it's just it's crazy if you really think about it and really dig deep the amount of control that Israel has within the United States government.
Absolutely. And it's all money. It's all funds. It's all connection and religion.
Yeah.
I mean, religion, this is, I mean, reasons not to make everyone think deep, but essentially religion has, for as long as I feel like men have been alive, always been tied to controlling state and people in power. And so, because how people
Absolutely.
believe is how people will choose to spend their time and funds. And so, even though we're technically not supposed to be one of those countries, women have already lost the right to control what happened to their bodies in this country because of that, even though it doesn't control our country. So I'm not surprised by any means that that's the case when it
Yeah.
comes to where the benefactor or the money is coming from, because it's just, it blows my mind even more, because if you were to legitimately, like, say we were to get a Jewish president, oh my God, you think this country would lose their goddamn mind. They would flip the fuck out. They'd be like, no, like, no. But because of the place that they have nestled themselves into, essentially, with the government and at the top of the line, I guarantee you, if somebody were to run and they were Jewish, they would find a way to, like, make that work at this point in time.
Yeah.
I know I'm talking like a conspiracist person right now, but the change in media and just like conversations
It
lately.
feels all like fringe tinfoil hat, but I mean, look at the dystopian reality that we're existing in right now. Anything's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You think it wasn't possible before? Well, think again.
True. True.
And there are a lot of ties of one thing to another thing. There's rabbit holes everywhere.
Yeah, and I think to that point, about the Jewish president, I mean, I think that, you know, certain people in the powers that be within the United States government would lose their mind, not necessarily because of a Jewish president per se, but I think there would be a good, long, hard consideration as to whether or not that Jewish president is a Zionist or not.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, being lucky enough to be in DC this past Saturday, the Jewish contingent that is anti-Zionist was huge.
It was?
Yes.
Good. That makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah,
Oh my,
it was huge.
thank God.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like I talk to these, when I was talking to Zionists on other platforms, I don't anymore because it's just not worth my
Too
time.
much.
Yeah. I would always tell them, or ask them, and be like, you do realize that you're advocating for a state that, according to your own religion, especially if they were Jewish, I would say you're advocating for a state that, according to your own religious text, should not exist until the days of the second coming
Of
and
Christ.
yeah, and they just were like, oh yeah, well, basically the response that I would get was like something to the effect of like, oh yeah, well, we're doing it now, so it'll just happen when it happens.
Speaking of that,
That's why our
That's why they do.
evangelicals love it so
speaking of
much.
that, I will say I had someone close to me in the beginning try to argue with me, and I won't say who for the sake of production, but someone close to me decided to declare before the end of our conversation that Netanyahu was a man of God. And that
Hilarious.
was the end of that conversation.
I'm glad that was the end.
It was the end.
I mean, people in the KKK think that if you're not white, then you can't go to heaven. So I mean,
right? But
come on,
absolutely,
guys.
It's
Come on.
the same in the Mormon faith.
Absolutely.
You know that, right?
No,
Mormons
I
believe
do.
people
Oh, yeah.
who are not white,
Yep.
they don't go.
Ugh.
Not
They
white,
stay.
they don't go to heaven. Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. That is absolutely correct. They
Yep.
sure don't.
I lived in Utah. I know. I've had some interesting adventures in my life, and I've learned a lot of things, and that is one of them.
Heaven sounds awful.
Well, I don't want to be in that.
Me
heaven.
neither. Let's
I'm
go
coming to
party in hell.
then.
I don't want to be an all white.
Right?
I'm gonna be knocking on the door. Oh, screw
Bye.
that.
Like Billy Joel said, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints.
Yeah.
Shoot,
Yeah.
ain't no way. Heaven looking ugly if
way.
that's the case. Ew.
Yeah.
Ew.
And real quick, touching on Netanyahu for those that are still with us on Twitch and for those that might be listening to this in the future, Benjamin Netanyahu is not his given name. His given name is Benjamin Milikowski. He comes from Polish Jewish ancestry. And not only that, but I believe his father was a college professor. He actually went to high school at Cheltenham Academy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has a degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he spent time working at Bain Capital. And if the name Bain Capital rings a bell, he worked for them at the same time as retiring Utah Senator and 2012 American presidential candidate Mitt Romney. And he is also close personal friends with the Kushner family of Jared and Ivanka fame.
Oh.
It's a
Nasty.
small world after all. All right. So another thing I wanted us to take a look at, if you guys have the energy still to look at. So South Africa has a history of apartheid, right? Like most people, I'm assuming, understand, like they know a little bit about that. Maybe not all the details, but we understand, right? South Africa is at the bottom of the African continent, where people with melanin problems do not come from. But for some reason, the little bit of them were in control of the government, we're in control of the education system, we're in control of the police, right? And there was a two-tier system that was created and was, there for a very long time that separated, people by skin color, right? Apartheid.
Yeah.
Apartheid is also what's going on in Israel and Palestine, right? We have a two-tiered system. You remember hearing in the video that, in Gaza, it's on the coast, right? There's a beach there, like there's ocean. I mean, you can't go too far out or else you're getting, get shot maybe. But, you can
I did
see
mention
it.
that.
But there are people in the West Bank who have never been able to make it through, right? Because they keep those walls closed. They prevent the migration. They prevent the movement of people. It's a two-tiered system. Like I think I said, there's like 50 laws, I think, that exist that physically and in every way separate non-Jewish people from Jewish people in terms of rights to education, rights to permits to build things, rights to probably purchase
And even
things.
if you are able to get a job in, say, like Jerusalem, coming in from somewhere else, in a normal situation, it would only take you maybe a few minutes to an hour, depending on how far you're traveling. Going in and out can take up to like 6 hours or more just to get to a place. And you have to be prepared to be stopped for any amount of time.
Yeah, and I've heard stories from Palestinians where their families live in one village and their cousins and aunts and uncles live literally the next village over, and they have to go through 3 or 4 Israeli checkpoints
And then make it as long a way as possible.
Yeah. So like Mia was saying, what should be a 10, 15, maybe 20-minute drive is hours.
They're not allowed to drive on the same roads or walk on the same sidewalks.
Yeah, there was a video I saw on TikTok of a Palestinian woman that I believe it was in the West. I believe it was in the West Bank. The front door to her home had been welded shut because it was on a street that had been deemed, like Mia said, that had been made illegal for Palestinians to go down. So she literally had to go up on her roof and roof hop from home to home until she could find a street that she was allowed to be on. Like, let that sink in. Like, let that sink in for a moment. Like, just the utter lack of just dignity It's just, if you think about it, it's just mind blowing.
Separate
Yeah.
can never be equal.
Amen on that.
Can never be equal.
100%.
So going back, so South Africa, who has a very deep history of apartheid and slavery and all of these issues, they went to the International Court and they filed a petition and they said, "Hello, International Court. Hi, we're South Africa. We've got our history of things. We've got some problems that we'd like to report to you, and we have some evidence that our dear friends in Israel are committing genocide. They're violating the Geneva Convention in all of these different ways. Here, let us tell you all of the ways." And so there's a documented report, and I will put a link in the show notes if you'd like to check it out yourself. Yeah, if you want to take a look at this, guys, I think it would blow your mind. It's about 83 pages, 84 pages that's put together. It's pretty easy to read. It's pretty easy to read. But I thought maybe we could read a few excerpts. Introduction. So I'm on page 9, and it says here, since the 7th of October of 2023, Israel is engaged in a large-scale military assault by air, land, and sea on the Gaza Strip. It's a narrow strip of land, about 365 square kilometers, one of the most densely populated places in the world. Gaza is home to about 2.3 million people, half of them children.
Almost half of them children. Jesus.
They've been subjected by Israel to what has been described as one of the heaviest conventional bombing campaigns in the history of modern warfare. By the 29th of October, about 6,000 bombs per week had been dropped in the tiny enclave. In about 2 months, the attacks have wreaked more destruction than the razing of Syria's Aleppo between 2012 and 2016, Ukraine's Mariupol, or proportionally the Allied bombing of Germany in World War II. More bombs than any of those experiences in our modern history. The destruction was so wrought by Israel is so extreme that Gaza now has a different color from space. It's a different texture. And this document that I linked in the chat is filled with examples, heartbreaking examples. And this is about a month old now. This was the end of December, I think, when this report was put together. I'm sure the statistics are different now. But in this report, it said something like 110 children every single day are dying in Gaza from not only the warfare, but now it's gotten to the point where they've been bombing hospitals. They've been taking doctors, nurses, ambulance drivers, first responders, kidnapping them so that there's nowhere to go if you're sick, if you get injured, if you get hurt. And more people are projected to die simply through famine, injury, and preventable diseases than actual bombings at this point. That is their goal.
Yeah, it's bad if you have a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, and the Israeli Defense Forces have killed more children on a daily average in the last 105 days than Nazi Germany did in 5 years of the existence of the Auschwitz concentration camp.
And I think it's important that you state that for anyone who likes to think that this is something in kinds of being anti-Jewish.
Yeah, and not only that, but I believe it was in the first 2 weeks, so from October 7th to October 20th, the Israeli Defense Forces dropped more explosive ordnance on the Gaza Strip in that 2-week period than the United States did in any single year we were at war with Afghanistan.
Pretty bad.
It's evident.
Pretty bad.
It's very evident. The crimes against humanity. So I do recommend, if you're interested in getting to know more, I will for sure put show notes when I do publish this on Spotify. So anyone will be welcome to go check out that document for themselves.
Absolutely.
But it's worth the read. It's hurtful. It's painful, but it's worth the read to just inform yourself and not be subject to Zionist propaganda. This is a real document in an international court from South Africa, documenting, thanks to so many people who've probably lost their lives as a result.
Yeah.
another fact. Since October 7th, the Israeli Defense Forces have killed more journalists in 105 days than the entirety
Yeah.
of the Second World War, which lasted 6 years.
Or the
Yeah.
Vietnam War. Yeah.
And those are the people that are
Mhm.
getting us the information we need. It's a big reason why well, it's not a big reason, but it's certainly one of the reasons why not too long before this they were trying to shut down. They realized that TikTok is more than just a kids app. It is a way that we are able to share information with each other and keep each other in the know. And allows anybody to kind of share what their story. And so there are reasons why those bans are in place in certain areas. There's reasons why certain countries don't allow it whatsoever. And that's why they continue to try and shut it down, because that's a huge reason why they believe that us as Americans are receiving Palestinian propaganda, and they're actually aren't they trying to take it to the courts to try and have it? Well, we don't understand why there's been an increase in so many Palestinian sympathizers with anyone who's a TikTok consumer, and it's just like that's the information that's being shared, and in
The
actuality, I guess
information and people are choosing their humanity.
they're choosing. Well, not only are they choosing humanity, but it's funny because if it's someone who's pro-Israel, that is actually pushed out 10 times more likely than the Palestinian information. Even if your FYP says one thing or another, it's actually
Mhm,
they're trying to
mhm.
push out that
They're
information because they don't
trying.
understand why people aren't
The thing
people
is,
to.
it's forced so hard that it doesn't look right.
It
It's
does it.
forced so hard, it doesn't look right. And
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are aware. Some of us are more aware than others. Israel has a paying campaign
Mhm.
to
Yep.
spread propaganda.
Yep.
Yeah, they're paying TikTok creators, and they're trying to I say convert, but they're trying to flip pro-Palestinian TikTok creators with the enticement of payments anywhere up to $5,000 to put out pro-Israel propaganda. And I forget so this number might be out of date. But the Israeli government has spent over $1.5 million to get social media creators, and TikTok specifically, to put out pro-Israel propaganda. And yet and there's been no money put out for the pro-Palestinian propaganda, and we can very clearly see, by the protests that are going on, who's winning the propaganda war, and it's not the state of Israel.
They shut down New York City. They blocked like 4 of the major bridges in solidarity for Palestine. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
No.
And
Yeah.
they marched all the way to JFK Airport in Queens.
And they are trying to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
Quiet.
I want to address the question that Mrs. Yeti put in the chat, because I think it's a really difficult one to figure out what to do with sometimes. So she says, I know I'm famously Mormon, but I grew up in a shockingly high Jewish population. My friends fall on both sides. Is there any way or point in attempting to appeal to those who don't see this for what it is? I.e., there are people who have been fed the Zionist propaganda mindset and are now kind of caught in that space. I want to ask the panel first before I respond. What do you
I think
guys think of that question?
the first thing I'll say and preface with is to understand that when it comes to indoctrination, deconstruction does not happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that if
Mhm.
you are,
Yeah.
and it's strong, because I've in my righteous anger and upset, it's easy to forget that some people take longer to process and do the work than you, because everyone's at a different stage. Everyone's at a different stage of understanding. having a conversation where you can at least respect each other really does matter, and it helps to lay the groundwork. And it's really hard when you're so passionate about such a matter that really does feel and is between life or death. So to understand deconstruction takes time.
It does take time, and part of that deconstruction is information,
Right.
right? And education. And I think nudging people now, not all of them, maybe they won't watch it, maybe they won't read it, but all you can do is nudge them towards that. And so nudging them towards watching documentaries like Tantura, Tantura. It's a very difficult watch, but that is one that can zap people
Yeah.
right into the truth. If they're open to it, and then sending them different resources, starting to introduce them to other pieces of information that they have not been seeing in the Western media. So that's part of deconstructing. So you're going to want to introduce them to
Yeah,
information.
and this
Very
might
important.
I don't know why this is the comparison that popped into my head, and I will preface it by saying it's a little morbid. But if you've ever heard the stories, of how a husband poisons and kills their wife or vice versa by slipping a little bit of the poison in their food a little bit at a time until it builds up, that is almost how I would treat how that is how I would treat trying to change somebody's mind. You could just start out with, just small, simple facts that we as Westerners and Americans specifically take for granted. Like, hey, did you know that people in Gaza, that the Israeli government has made it illegal for residents in the Gaza Strip to collect rainwater and things like that, and just build from there if you don't think that they are ready to dive head on into something like Tantora. Because I will admit, I tried watching Tantora and I got such a visceral reaction of anger. And I only got about half an hour in. I only got about half an hour into it, and I believe it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. So
Mm-hmm.
Tantora is really heavy, but like Nancy said, it is an important documentary to watch, because what a lot of people don't realize is what we now consider the Israeli Defense Forces. Prior to 1948, there were three Jewish militia groups in and not only the British Mandate of Palestine, but even going back to the Ottoman Empire. They're known as the Haganah, the Ergun, and the Lehi. And I'm going to call them what they were. They were terrorist groups. And those groups, then once once the UN partition plan went into effect and the British left in May of 1948, they became the Israeli Defense Forces. So, and not only that, but I think it's also important to point out that there have been numerous prime ministers of Israel that served in these terrorist groups. Uh, Yitzhak Shamir did, Yitzhak Rabin, Menachem Begin, Shimon Peres, pretty much all of
All of
them.
them.
I mean, I don't know about Golden Meir, but
It's a prerequisite to be in that
yeah,
office to have done that, and been part of that.
yeah.
That's
Like their
to
rite of
whatever
passage
extent,
of some
that's
sort.
whatever.
Yeah,
But
and some of them had to change of heart. Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, they really fought for peace. But it ended up costing Yitzhak Rabin his life. And fun fact, he was not assassinated by a Palestinian. He was assassinated by an ultra right-wing Zionist Jew.
So
yeah.
I guess a response I will add, Mrs. Yeti, to that question as well. I finished my graduate education 2016. And one of the things they taught me in school was like, okay, you're the clinician, so you've got to be a blank slate now. No politics, no religion. We don't talk about that in the room. That's gonna compromise your therapeutic rapport. And I was like, that must be so nice for you cis straight white men to believe that your identity never enters a therapy office. That's great for you. Doesn't work for
In
me.
fact, there are so many that seek out specific people to fit their needs.
And the election season since I got out of grad school has been rife with right-wing propaganda here in the United States, with conversations very not too dissimilar. Like I said, that shift in body language of that settler that I saw, it's the same process that happens here when people get indoctrinated into the Fox News world. I'll call it that
I
gently.
would say one thing to add to, just because you brought up, going to school. My partner didn't grow up really knowing a lot about anything having to do with Palestine and Israel and why it was the way they were until he was in college, until he was learning and speaking to the other student body groups that were, protesting. And he just had a peek, again, another peek into the crack of what was going on. And he still didn't know entirely what was going on until recently. And I've had to make it a point to share and grow together. We've had so many conversations. He's been, luckily, super supportive, super understanding, has been my rock. But it's a process of learning and getting this information, because it doesn't come to everyone all at once. Not everyone knows where to look. They don't know where to start.
Also, the way every individual processes information is a little different, and the pace is going to be different. The comprehension is going to be different. They may have to repeat it more than another. Like it's so different. It's very individualistic the way people wake up to something or learn, process information. Like it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a different way of putting the advice you got about poisoning people. Sometimes a little osmosis works well. When you have a
Can we
friend.
compare it to something like micro dosing something?
Yeah, microdosing.
yeah,
Microdosing.
microdosing is
I was
good.
blanking on that. I was blanking on that term, but yeah, that's exactly what
No,
I was
I
trying
got
to
you.
say.
I think the other strategy that goes hand in hand with that is the magical power of cringe. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but when somebody says something that's out of that, that book that you're talking
Yeah.
about, if you can find a way to say something that doesn't outright call them out, but gives them just that little bit of cringe that they don't like, that can be
Oh yeah.
such an effective tool. Because if you point out like they're wrong, well, of course, the wall is going to go right back up
Oh,
like
oh
easily.
yeah. Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you can give them a little sense of questioning, give them a sense of wondering, you've done a great job of trying to help them to deconstruct, and it takes time.
We were talking about like social media suppression earlier. And there have been a lot of great, TikToks that I have seen where they've been like my favorite one still, and I wish I could find it again, was a TikToker was making hummus, and that was all you saw on the screen, was like him physically making hummus, and then he so subtly related it to what's been going on since October 7th that like you didn't even I watched it probably, 5 or 6 times before I stopped paying attention to what he was cooking and what he was saying. So like it's almost like if you can trick like if you come across somebody that's on the fence necessarily, which I don't understand why you would be after 105 days, but that's another topic.
and all the
Yeah.
footage that is available. Like I would just direct them to most people have Instagram nowadays. I personally I would just be like, go watch Montez, go watch Bisan, go watch all that, then
Yeah.
come back to me. All right. I don't like sometimes I don't have the patience or the tolerance to sugarcoat and like, oh, let me baby them, let me coax them. We don't have time for that. There's
Yes.
a full-blown genocide happening.
Yeah.
Go watch Montez and then come back
Yeah.
to me, all right? And tell me if
Right.
that's okay,
Yeah.
what you just saw. Like, is that okay?
Do I need to have a sit in and like I have like the projection thing out? I create a presentation with PowerPoint. I could provide all of that. The fact is, I don't know if
PowerPoint.
people are going to come, but then they'll just say I'm trying to indoctrinate them, right?
Yeah. I forget whose TikTok live stream I was in, but it was just a few days ago. And this person came up onto the panel in the live stream, and they were very clearly what I now refer to as a baby Zionist, because you can tell the ones that have been doing it since October 7th, because you can tell the ones that have been doing it for the last 105 days, because as a pro-Palestinian, I know what they're going to say before they say it. But this person came up and was like fumbling over their words and was like, well, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn the actions they did on October 7th? And the host
Remember
and I
when we
were
talked about a rite of passage? This is like
yeah,
the rite of passage.
yeah. And the host and I were both like, dude, like it's 105 days in. You're asking stuff that was like played out on like day 25. Like, did you
Mhm.
not get the updated script? Like, are you get yeah, are
Get
you
the update.
Yeah.
They
yeah.
didn't get the update. No, they need to catch up. They're behind. Like this. No.
Yeah.
And the best, yeah, and like for a lot of these Zionists that I've seen on other platforms, the best way I've heard it described is like they're coming. It's like what it would be like watching a television. It would be like watching season 5 of your favorite television show while completely ignoring seasons 1 through 4 and just acting like season 5 is the beginning. And they come in like
Mhm.
they'll come in and they'll be like, and in the beginning, obviously, it was like October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, and you would come back with,
Yeah.
well, what about, Sabra and Shatila in 1982, Der Yassin in 1948, the massacre in the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank in 2002, and their response would always be, well, what about October 7th? And it's like there's some weird cognitive dissonance where they're just like they can't ignore like if and I don't know like I notice it a lot in what I'm assuming are younger millennials slash older Gen Z, and I don't know if it's like the fact that like the closer you get to Gen Z, just attention span as a whole has just completely deteriorated.
If you're
But
gonna
it's
give
like
me a conversation, I need a video of like that little guy running in order to pay attention.
yeah, exactly. Like they refuse. So I'm looking at the chat on my phone right now. And Mrs. Yeti Whiskers actually asked a good question. They asked, "Can I ask what the best possible solution you hope for is?" And I personally believe so. To kind of give a little context, there are two paths that people generally consider. One being what is known as the two-state solution, where Israel would continue to exist, and what is now the occupied territories of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank would become the state of Palestine. And then the one I personally believe in is a one-state solution. And the reason that I personally believe in a one-state solution, and this is a question that I pose to Zionists that they never seem to have an answer for, is I believe in a one-state solution because we've seen over the past 75 years what Israel has done to the occupied territories in Palestine. And I personally don't believe that they would respect Palestinian sovereignty if there was a two-state solution. I think we would just see more of the same. And so I personally believe in a one-state solution, just everybody living together like they were prior to 1948.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's my solution as well. I mean, if somebody comes to my home, steals it, kicks the shit out of me, abuses me, and then comes around and is like, hey, let's split the house now. I'm going to be like, no, give me my damn house back. Okay. If you're going to be peaceful and everything, I mean, you can live right over there. You can build your house, but this is my home. This is my land. And we can live together, but like, it's just weird. You know what I mean? Like two-state just doesn't sit right with me. We need to go back to how we said like how everything was before. But the problem is that I'm sorry, they've created so much division and hatred and chaos in the land and within the people that it's like even if we were to be like, okay, it's Palestine, everybody can live here if you're peaceful, but I don't know how that would actualize with the current population, because before the early 1900s everybody lived there, coexisted harmoniously. It wasn't just Palestinian Arabs. There were also ethnic minorities. There were also Jews, although they were a minority as well. And it was all fine, but there wasn't the brainwash yet. There wasn't the hatred yet. There wasn't confusion and chaos yet. So even if we were to, let's say if they were like, all right, it's Palestine, I'm just like, okay, how are we going to sort this mess out? But in terms of what it should absolutely be Palestine.
And my thing too,
opinion.
and I realized this a while ago, is there's such a disconnect between, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, geographically speaking.
Yeah.
Are you going to give a Palestinian state everything between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? And at that point, why not just make it a single state and let everybody travel freely?
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to touch on something because I don't think we have yet. Is there's a big divide on people's interpretation, and the divide being between Zionists and the Palestinians and pro-Palestinians, right? Of the phrase "from the river to the sea." I think Nancy and I are both very familiar with that phrase, having said it for years and years and years and years. People believe that that just means that we want to ultimately eliminate the Jewish people.
You
And that is not,
colonizers. Oh my gosh.
I know. And that we would want to exterminate them. And that's not what it means or what it's about at all. It's about from the river to the sea, our people will have equal rights and be free.
The whole entirety of the land, everyone.
The whole entirety. And that means everyone, the Jews and the Palestinians, who also come in every flavor of faith, have equal rights to the land to coexist, but that we get to coexist.
As they did.
Exactly. So I just wanted to add that because
as they did.
Because the arguing point is always, you say that, and that means that you want to unalive people, that you want to create another Holocaust. And they say this to distract from the fact that we are saying this, what is happening now is actually a genocide. And us calling for liberation is us calling for their extermination. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, it's a very narcissistic tactic to flip things.
Oh, yeah.
Like they will
I'm
flip,
aware.
because I think those of us, no, I know, I'm saying to the viewers, like, if you are familiar with what's been going on, I know not all of you are, but if you are familiar with it, you can see that this is like narcissism 101. It's psychopathy 101. What a narcissist does is they flip things on you, right? So whatever they're doing, they blame you for that. So they're projecting, right? Because they're committing genocide. So it's like, oh my God, how dare you say from there you're going to genocide us? What? No, calm down. This is an oppressed people, and this is their emancipatory slogan. They want emancipation. They want liberation. This has nothing to do with slaughtering you. In fact, before the early 1900s, everybody was welcomed in. They weren't they weren't like ready to beat you up when you arrived to Palestine. They were like, no, come, come, come. I'm gonna
They
feed you.
would
Come
love
over.
and take
Let's
care
have
of
some
each
coffee.
other.
They just want liberation. This is about liberation. That slogan is an emancipatory slogan of oppressed people that want
Yeah,
liberation.
and if you want to talk about the people that really don't care for those of other faiths and ethnicities, you can find video online of Zionist Israelis spitting on Christians, and you can find videos online of police officers in Jerusalem assaulting Orthodox Jews because they are not Zionist enough. But yet, they've done
Yeah.
such a great job over the last 75 years of dehumanizing the Palestinian people that they have the entire Western world fooled. And it's only within the last 105 days that the majority of the Western world has woken up and said, hey, you know what? Maybe like what we've thought for the better part of the last century isn't true. I mean, another example would be three Americans went on what's known as a birthright trip, which is basically an indoctrination into Zionism trip. I'm gonna call it what it is.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Say how it is.
So basically,
We don't have to sugarcoat everything
yeah.
here, at least so far.
So basically, they will take American Jews, and I believe it's encouraged that you be Jewish to go on a birthright trip, but I don't believe it's a prerequisite or a requirement. But they basically take you to Israel for 2 weeks. You know, you go to all the touristy hot spots, and they tell you how great the state of Israel is. Well, it was just back, I believe, late October, early to mid-November, maybe. There were three American teenagers who started asking questions about Palestine, and they got kicked off their birthright trip, kicked out of the hotel, nowhere to go. And you know who took them in for the remainder of the 2 weeks? A Palestinian family. And they have made posts on social media saying how welcomed they were and how everything they learned about Palestinian people couldn't be further from what they actually experienced.
That warms my heart.
That's so interesting.
And I don't want to sound like petty or anything weird about it, but like the hospitality of Palestinians, it's so strong. It's so strong.
It's amazing. It's amazing how these people have been oppressed for so long. If it were me, and I mean, yes, I'm not Jewish and I'm from there, but I'm from up north. Our village is up north. It's not in the West Bank. It's not in Gaza. But if I were in their shoes, in the West Bank in Gaza, I would have lost my damn mind. Okay, but these people still are able to not only maintain their humanity, but they're so warm. They're so kind. They're like, listen, this is wrong to do to anyone. But when you see that these people are one of the kindest, warmest people you'll ever meet, there's just that extra layer of like that gives you chills of it just being so disgusting. And it's not just me because I'm biased because I'm Palestinian. Like I've had people that have traveled the world, okay, that said that yes, I've been to Palestine and they are so friendly. They're one of the friendliest people I've ever met, the Palestinians. Despite what they have gone through, despite the horror that they have been put through, their heart is still there and they're so warm and they're so friendly. And I hope everyone will get to go one day and meet them. And before I cry, I'm going to stop. And the Middle East and the anti-Islam propaganda in general also, it's been very potent with the mind control. Like they've been going hard with it. And mind control, the human mind is very programmable. And you can program it for bad things and you can program it for good things. For example, with hypnotherapy, right? If you want to help yourself and you want to heal or you want to quit smoking, whatever it is, hypnotherapy is great. And that works on that premise of reprogramming the mind. But what the powers that be have done is that they've been programming people and through society and everything. I mean, this is a lot to talk about, but programming. You're programmed from birth, basically. And there's certain areas, certain people, certain topics that they've been really going hard with the mind control. And that's, the Palestinian issue is one of those things. And when somebody is successfully mind controlled, they can't think for themselves. It overrides the heart, so empathy is kind of wiped out. Yeah, just almost feels like they don't have a soul because they'll see the horrific things, but they'll just look the other way. It's justified. They'll try to justify it, which is crazy, right? To see horrific things. That's the power of mind control. It starts with the mind, and they know that. They know the power of the mind and how programmable the mind is, and so they go for that. They means the group, whatever. I believe there is people at the top, or beings, or whatever they are. I don't know, that they're not human to me. That control the world. They have their grip on everything. And I just want to say real quick before Mia picks up, because she wants to say something. Those that I'm talking about were the same ones behind the Native American thing that happened. The ones that came here, genocided the Native Americans, did all the copy. It's the same thing. What's happening over there? Same tactics, same strategy. Copy paste. Okay, they always do it everywhere. Copy paste. So I mean, Native America, it's the biggest genocide ever. It's insane when you look into it, the numbers, what they did, the tactics, the strategies, and everything. So they dominated over here. Now they want to dominate the Middle East. It's all about domination, and it's coming from somewhere.
Bit of programming and how we kind of slip into that, and you notice how like people that really get sucked into it, especially when it comes to Islamophobia, xenophobia, general anti-Arab rhetoric. The people that take that and then commit crimes based on. Have you ever looked at their criminal photos and seen the expressions on their faces? You ever taken the time? There's something vacant there. There's something that can tend to be a little bit disturbing. And I point that out because I believe I've told Anthony and I've told Nancy, I am a victim of a hate crime. My family's victim of a hate crime. My father, over 30 years ago, was martyred here in the United States because he was a Muslim, because he was Palestinian. So that is another reason why I do what I do. And that person who did it was our landlord. This was someone that my father had conversations. He was very proud and very open and very hospitable and sharing his culture, his background, what he believed in. This other person was a very indoctrinated, extremely just driven by the programming that Nancy mentioned, and it caused him to act and snap. Unfortunately, that led to an unaliving father. That led to me not growing up within my culture because I was so separated from it. I ended up having to live with the repercussions of that, and it leaves huge ripple effects.
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring that up is not just to make it about me, but also just to point out when I see the patterns of that. Because when you look at the more recent crimes here in the United States that are related to what's going on, you heard about the three college boys who were attacked, the little boy in Illinois and his mother, who were also attacked by their landlord, and the young boy was also alive. So when I see that, it resonates with me, not only because of my pain, but because I'm recognizing how and why that happened. And I want people to understand that because, we're not just saying this just to try to only convince you in this fringe sort of way. It is very true that the psychological effects of the way people are manipulated by the propaganda and the rhetoric being forced upon us for years really does cause some severe issues, and it really does hurt people for years, even after a single act. And now when you look at the way that they justify what is happening overseas and the mentality behind that, and the way they say, oh, but it's okay because, but is it? Is it? And you have to look at the way that the people who say these things behave as they say so, because That is what happens because of that programming.
Yeah, and Mia, I just want to say real quick, and I've said this to others, Amal, I'm sure you know I said this to her too. Never say that, oh, it's not that I'm making this about me. I don't want to make it about me. Never ever say that. Please always share your story because I want to see more and more people sharing their stories. It's
Oh
very
yeah.
important. It's not just all about just the facts and the logic and the technical stuff. We
Oh,
need to hear
absolutely.
personal stories. It is very important. So blast it proudly. It's sad, it's tragic, but do not
Yeah,
hesitate
we
to
are
share
not
it. The
numbers. We are
world needs
not
to hear it.
statistics. We are real people, and this does affect us.
Whole
This
ass
is not
humans.
something. This
Yeah.
is not
Yes.
something I chase for clout. This
Yeah.
is not something I look to be a special, snowflake about. This is who I am. This is the life that I've led, the 36 years that I've existed on this earth. And I can't ignore that. I can't erase who I am just to please and comfort others in the bubble that they've existed in blissfully. I've had to be acutely aware of my existence and how it's come to be.
No, you're not going to tiptoe to make people comfortable. In fact, your story is very important to be heard so that people can realize what's been going on. And this is another person with the story that relates to the whole topic that we're talking about. People need to hear more of these personal stories. Like I said, it's not just about the facts and 19 whatever and this and that. We need to also hear the human side of it, the suffering, the details on that end as well. So whatever. Like, don't ever think, oh, they're going to think it's for clout or
Mhm.
they're going to, whatever, let them think. People are always going to think whatever they're going to think. But you
Yeah.
got to speak
I
your
just
truth.
want that to be said because when people come to other people who are like me, they're going to throw things like that at them. And I want them to understand that it is okay to say what you need to say. But this is also what motivates me.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with Nancy, because as a white person that acknowledges my privilege, it's important to hear those stories because those are stories that I fully acknowledge that I will never experience. I will never know what it's like to go through what you went through, and that makes hearing those stories, at least from my perspective as a white person, all the more important to hear.
Like I could fill a book with the ripple effects. Let's just put it that way, And
I look forward to reading that
it, it-
memoir someday, Mia.
one day, I will promise not to put it off for forever, though.
So there's an interesting book. I don't know if you guys have encountered it. It's called On Killing by a man named David Grossman. He was a military trainer and scholar. And so in his book, he references his theory of what he calls the safety catch. The safety catch is this basic idea that it is not within our default settings to be able to murder. It's just not part of who we are as a human being. In order for that safety catch to drop, there has to be certain reasons for that to happen. And so he talks about the history of military issues during, World War One. We had shell shock, right? This, precursor to what we now know as PTSD. All these guys were shutting down. They were dissociating. They were trying to figure out how to rectify this understanding that I'm having to fire this gun at someone who looks kind of like me on the other end of that. That is really hard to process as a human being. And one of the big challenges in the early military history, even before, World War One, was the misfire rate. Basically, you would have the guy aim and he'd purposefully miss his target. That misfire rate was huge in a lot of our earlier wars. That's why we have firing squads, right? You had 10 guys aiming at a dude because then we can all have the plausible deniability. Maybe it wasn't my shot. Maybe it was the other dude, right? The idea is that in order for that safety catch to drop, they had to manufacture the conditions where it could work. And he writes in his book about how military training changed in the 70s with the Vietnam War, at least in the US. I don't know about internationally, but in the US, our soldiers went through psychological training. They went through brainwashing. They went through a process that turned off the switch. And that's why we got massacres like My Lai. That's why we got all of these awful things that were televised that were being committed by our American soldiers in Vietnam, because they figured out how to turn it off. The CIA and developed that program. They knew how to do it. And I imagine they didn't turn it back on for some of those guys. They ended up real messed up for a very long time. Families, again, the rippling effects of these things, because PTSD doesn't just affect an individual, it affects everybody. And that's the kind of training that has been manicured, it has been perfected, it has been shared with our allies.
100%.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, it obviously wasn't nearly to the extent that we see today, with social media and things like that. But Vietnam specifically was the first American conflict where we as American citizens were, I don't want to say in real time, but we're hearing firsthand accounts of what was going on, and realizing that it's not adding up, and people were questioning, well, why are we over there? And when you're an American GI coming home from Vietnam, and you're getting spit on in the airport, and you're being called a baby killer, that can mess you up psychologically just as much as what you went through when you were in Vietnam. And I don't think that necessarily gets talked about enough when it comes to Vietnam. It's not being widely reported on because, as we mentioned, the Israeli government manicures what they put out.
underreport things.
Yeah, but I have read articles where there are reservists in the Israeli Defense Forces that have been sent home from Gaza that are waking up from nightmares that they are having because of what they did to the Palestinian people.
Because it's not in our nature to do that. We are not born to do that, and it has devastating effects on everybody. I guess a comment I want to make when I was reading through the report and just seeing other updates that made me think about was, because so many families are being destroyed, so many people are losing everyone in their family, not just one person, not just a distant cousin. There are some
Whole
people who are
families.
losing their whole families. When I think about, like, what is something that's traumatic and what is something that is not, to me, it's about what is around you while you're going through this experience and what is not. And I remember having a conversation with somebody when we were talking about the border wall and the chaos that was happening here between the US and Mexico. They were taking families and separating these children from their parents. You are guaranteed that that child is going to develop some PTSD. If that child's with their parent, it significantly reduces that, right? Because part of what helps us defend against the manifestation of PTSD is having our community, having our supports, knowing that we're not alone. And that's just not the case in Palestine right now. Whole families are being
No.
destroyed, and it's going to impact for a long time the development of these human beings as they're going through this. That's just like one small microcosm of all of the damage here. But as a psychotherapist, it really sends out these alarm bells.
What we watched is obviously 10 years old. Right now, there are 2.2 million people living in the Gaza Strip, and roughly half of those are children. And just since October 7th, and Nancy and Mia, correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been, 1,800 families wiped off the registry since October 7th?
I don't know the exact number, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a lot. The entire family name has
Yeah.
been wiped out. Like there's no more of that
I've
lineage.
seen a whole
That's it.
list of an entire family that was wiped out. For example, my dad's best friend, who I would call an uncle, as an adopted uncle, he has family there. I think it was near the first month and a half, 17 members 17 members. All it takes is an instant, and it's the most horrific.
And we can't even wrap our minds around that, right? Because there are so many people that I know that have lost cousins, aunts, and
There have been relatives.
it's not one or two people.
I can't even count because I don't even know how many people of my family that were left.
17. Like, do you all realize 17? He lost 17 people.
And the scary and saddening and maddening part is, to most Americans, losing 17 family members would seem like a lot, but when it comes to what's been going on over the course of the last 105 days, 17 is low. There are people in Gaza that have lost 50, 60, 70, upwards of 100 family members.
There are children that have no family members left, and on top of it, they're now crippled, and they've lost limbs, and they're half of their face is bandaged, and on top of losing all, not one single family member is left. It's just them.
Yeah.
So one of the big challenges a lot of people faced with the pandemic, with COVID, is because of the restrictions that were in place, a lot of people died alone. They died without their family. They
I
couldn't
can
see
add to
them.
that one too.
They couldn't be there. Imagine how many people are not being recovered. How much grieving cannot happen for these families, for these kids, for these people.
You don't really get room to grieve properly. You don't, because they're under constant bombardment.
It's going to have to happen later, and I can imagine that's going to be very ugly and very intensely difficult. In terms of right now, I mean, if you've seen the footage and they identify them and they look at them as their child or sister or brother or mother, whoever's passed away, and right in front of them, they're in constant bombardment, like Mia said, and they're under such pressure and stress that they can't even, like, you'll see them be like, okay, that we gotta go, like, that's it, and they're trying to cry and they're trying to say goodbye, and they're holding and hugging, and you have the other ones prying them off of the body, and not out of just being mean or anything like that. It's because they got to keep going, they got to keep moving, they got to keep up, and it's so sad to see them pry them off while they're crying, and stop the goodbye that's happening, because they have to just hustle. There's so many bodies, there's so much to do, there's so much chaos,
and there's only so many hands that can handle doing the jobs that need doing.
Yeah, and it was so
Absolutely, yeah.
bad in the beginning. I'm sure you've heard stories, Mia and Nancy, of families swapping children. Like, a father would give his brother one of his sons and take one of his nephews, just simply so the family, just so that if their respective houses were to be bombed, that the entire family wouldn't be killed. Yeah, like, I
Wiped
couldn't
out, yeah.
imagine, like, that, and that's, like, almost playing, like, Russian roulette.
And in some families, it's all or nothing. They all stay in the same house together because if they're going to go, they don't want to go without each other.
They want to go together. Yeah.
Because they would rather do that than leave Gaza.
So we could continue to go on about
I
these
know
experiences, but I want us to
we've had
transition
a long time to do it.
if it's okay, to have some conversation about, like, okay, it's shocking, it's gross, I feel icky in my tummy.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I do? Hi, hello, I don't know what to do. I'm just a little American. What's happening? Right? So
Yeah.
I think one thing I want to say that is really important, and you guys are more welcome to chime in here, is education. That is the first thing that you can do to figure out what's going on, to learn the history. I have a link if you want to check it out. Just some Palestine 101 here. If you want to get some of the facts, go check that out. It's a website. It's kind of interactive. There's some pictures.
I have a suggestion too, because we've mentioned about Palestinian hospitality so much and the things that are going on. If you look up local, like, if you can, because I know not every town has one, look up where the mosque or a masjid is, and you can go and they'll invite you in and you can ask them to learn about things.
Yeah.
I super appreciate all of the conversation that has happened tonight. I feel like I was a little bit more of a bystander to it, but I am more than happy to listen, and I really value the voices that I have heard tonight, and you've affected me greatly, and my perspective on this situation is changed. Uh, Not that I was necessarily, thinking of it in the opposite way, but as a person who was, maybe unsure of exactly how to perceive everything. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation to parse through, and it's tough when you don't necessarily have the frame of reference for that. So I really appreciate having the opportunity even just to sit in on a conversation with people who are so directly connected to this situation. All three of you had such wonderful things to say, and Nancy and Mia especially having such a personal connection. Won't go on any further, but thank you so much. I really truly appreciate this time. Effector, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for hearing us, and thank you for being open and sitting with us. And I want to see more and more of this happen, because this is exactly talking about, well, what do we do? This is one of the things that we need to do.
Yeah.
And thank you for sitting with us, listening to us. I appreciate you.
Yeah, the pleasure was entirely mine.
We're all students of the world too, so it's
Oh, yeah.
the growth mindset matters, and it's appreciated that you're here just to listen and learn with us.
Yeah, and learning is an ongoing journey. I mean, I know I said I've been, studying this for years, but I'm always learning something new every day about this, about this genocide. And it's realizing that you don't know what you don't know, I think, is key in situations like these, because you can come in like Mia and Nancy, we see it all the time on TikTok, these Zionists that just come in and they spout the same bullshit that we've been hearing for 105 days, and you just go down the checklist. It's like, no, that's been debunked. No, that's been debunked. Like, can you please come at us with some new topics? Like, they don't even have to be factual. Just come at us with something different. And then when you when you refute them, it's like they're so quick to they either do one of two things. They either pivot, or it's, what about da 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 da. Acknowledging, I guess the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, is acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know is key, because you can come into spaces like this and be humbled very quickly. But if you come in with a willingness and an eagerness to learn, that's key in my opinion.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I said before, but I think like the loudest voices in my ear over this whole scenario have been from an Israeli or a Zionist perspective. And I can see in, pieces of information, and I can say, that doesn't sound, I don't know if I'm on board with that, but where do I go from there? And, that desire for learning and desire for knowledge is what brought me here tonight. And I just super appreciate everyone's input and your perspective.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a wonderful night, everyone.
You too.
Bye. Good night.
Bye now.
So yes, education is important, y'all. Is important. Just learning. And that's part of why I wanted to have this talk on my little platform here, because that's something I can do, right? I can go on the internet and I can say hello.
You can be the person that starts the conversation.
Yeah, we can have these conversations. I can do some research, right? And kind of pass it along, right? Like, if you didn't know, here's some history. If you didn't know, here's what's happening. If you didn't know, it's always been happening. Guess what? No, I think that's the first thing that we can do, really inspire. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Yeti. Is to just really be learning, have these conversations. If you have people in your circle that you've been feeling uncomfortable because maybe they're Palestinian, check in with them. If they feel like they want to talk.
Treat them with kindness.
Treat
They'll
them with
talk to you
kindness.
if you treat them with kindness. You
Absolutely.
don't know what a person's going through, but treat them with kindness, because I can guarantee you, if you treat a person with respect when they're going through something, they're bound to open up to you, and you can learn something from them. But treat them with kindness first and foremost.
And I think the point Mia made, that we are all students of the world, right? Education doesn't
I
stop.
believe that 100%. It never stops.
Education doesn't stop just because you hung out in my
Mhm.
stream and we talked for, I don't know, almost 4 hours about this, right? There's always more to learn. So I'm going to link your TikTok channel, Nancy, in case anybody wants to
Oh,
go
thank you.
vibe.
Yeah,
Nancy
go ahead.
hosts these types of panels a lot on TikTok. A little bit of a different space than Twitch provides. It seems like you guys get way more randos from the FYP than I ever do. But if you guys want to learn more or continue to be part of these conversations, like, please go follow Nancy on TikTok. She goes live. Mia's there. We're all there. We're just vibing.
Where Nancy is, I tend to linger.
Yeah, all three of us are there. Yeah, we're linked.
Any other comments on education or resources you guys would suggest?
Like I was saying earlier, you can go to like a mosque or masjid just to kind of get an idea of the people there, or even if you're curious about, Palestinian people in particular, you can ask if there's anyone that's Palestinian that would be willing to talk to you, so you can understand. Because I can guarantee you, a lot of people will open their doors and their minds up to you if you're willing to be humble and be honest that in your curiosity. As far as other materials, I would say the documentaries. We've talked about Tantura, which can be a really hard pill to swallow. Nakba 1948. There is one that is called Palestine. Like, I have a short list, and it's endless. But there's like I Am Palestine. There
Yeah.
are a lot of major movies and just like made for documentary specific movies that can give you just a taste. That just kind of give you a taste of the experience and the knowledge. There's one that's called Letters to Palestine. That sounded very interesting to me. Letters to Palestine, it's 2010. It says Letters to Palestine gathers the voices of our people to read their letters never sent to the Palestinian people living under occupation. Young and old, these correspondents are given a unique chance to send Palestinians their love and their stories. I would say, if for some of these, go to Vimeo, because they have documentaries on Vimeo that are over a year, 2 years. They have stuff that's like 14, 15, 16 years old that have just been kind of sitting there neglected because of all the other media streaming websites. And you can go there and just type in Palestine. And I think when I looked, there was like 16,000.3 results per videos that popped up under Palestine. And you could go there, just sign up,
I
and
was
it's
gonna
free.
mention YouTube
Yeah,
too.
YouTube
Yeah.
too, for sure. The only thing I would say with YouTube,
If you just look up life in Palestine, there are also YouTubers. I can't remember his name right now, but he went there to visit. He has a friend he's not Palestinian. He has a friend who's Palestinian. This was a while back. And he vlogged like his time there, and you can see him hanging out with the Palestinian family and being shown around. So just even watching things like that. You said Vimeo, so I was thinking to also add in about
oh yeah,
YouTube, just watching
absolutely.
little clips, vlogs, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. I do want to mention. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Mia, go ahead. I want to make sure you're fully done before
Oh,
I
I was gonna
chime
say
in.
just be careful, because I feel like there's been a lot of content there, but for a period of time, uh, YouTube or someone, I don't know if it was the powers that be or what, but there were certain videos that are getting scrubbed that have been there for years until the conflict started. So some
Yeah.
of the videos that should be
Yeah.
there aren't. So which is why I brought up Vimeo, because it's been easily forgotten. And there's a lot of like
Mhm.
more documentary sort of style, but absolutely look at the vloggers too, because if you look at the stuff that's, prior to what's happened just this year, you're going to get a glimpse of what's been going on. And it's good to have those different perspectives.
Yeah, I forget the name of it. It was a documentary made in the 80s by Edward Said, a prominent Palestinian historian, and I'm totally blanking on the name of it, but I know you can find it on YouTube. And another one that I would recommend, and I know, and this one I know you can find on YouTube because I watched it. I would highly recommend watching The Occupation of the American Mind. It's a documentary that delves into just how much AIPAC not only controls our politicians, but our media as well. I have delved so deep into this that I just finished a book called Rise and Kill First it was written by an Israeli reporter by the name of Ronan Bergman. And it delves into the history of Israel's use of assassinations. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of the British Mandate in 1917 and how those three groups that I mentioned earlier, the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Lehi, would assassinate prominent. I mean, they were assassinating, Nazis in the 40s that would come to Palestine to hide out from their war crimes. And then you move into the 50s and 60s, they were assassinating Egyptian scientists that were helping Egypt develop a missile program. There's a very twisted history when it comes to the state of Israel that they have done an excellent job of keeping quiet, but the information is out there. Three more books that I would recommend. I would recommend The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. I would also recommend The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappé. And I would also recommend On Palestine, which is it's basically a transcript of a conversation between Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé.
If you want something very heartfelt and very beautiful film type of thing, I recommend looking into Mohanad Abu Rizk. I'll tell you how to spell it. I love his work. I adore his work. He has an Instagram page and a TikTok. The way you spell it is, I'm not in the chat or whatever. I don't know. I'm just here. I don't know how to do all that yet. But this is how you spell his name. M like Mary, OHANN like Nancy, NN, AD, okay, Mohanad with two N's, Abu, ABU, and then Rizk, RIZK. I absolutely love his work. Beautiful, beautiful clips. Definitely look into him. And then speaking of assassination, he was assassinated in 1972 in Beirut, Lebanon. My favorite ever, Ghassan Kanafani. The way you spell his, just Google him and just deep dive into him. I love him. You should see the interviews with him, his wit, the way he answers, everything. Oh, I resonate with it so much. I see myself in him. I don't know. So his name is Ghassan, Ghassan, okay? Ghassan, Kanafani, Kanafani. Adore him. He was assassinated in 1972. Like I said, he was born in Akka, which is one of my favorite places in Palestine. He ended up fleeing to Lebanon, and he was eventually assassinated there. But so yeah, those are the two that I'm gonna contribute.
So education is obviously one big thing that we can do, right? Where we can learn, we can immerse ourselves in culture. We don't have to just learn about all the awful, ugly things in Palestine. Sometimes we might want to just step into looking at the beauty. I mean, just looking at the food, right, that we saw in that documentary was incredible. Seeing different dishes that are prepared was cool. I love Mia's suggestion, right, of connecting with your locals, right? Seeing what they have to offer, because that osmosis can really help change your perspective. It doesn't necessarily have to be you learn every little piece of it, but having compassion and humanity for people of all kinds is really important. The next thing I think that is really important that we can do is we can protest. I know some of y'all, we're just in DC. That's awesome. So protest is something that is happening on a localized level, on a grassroots level, but protesting is also happening on a large level. Connected to that, there are boycotts. We talked about, I think, Starbucks in tonight's show, right? Clearly, that's one of the big ones that we're trying to promote. Divesting is a part of that, right? Deciding where you're going to spend your funds, who you're going to spend it on, what you're going to do. The large globalized strike is coming up. It's January
21st through the 28th. It's the whole week. Yeah.
And that is coming from journalists in Gaza. Bisan specifically aren't familiar with the idea of a global strike. Simply put, for that week, do not go to work. Do not send your kids to school. Obviously, if you have to work, it's okay. But do not buy gas. Do not use your credit cards. As we've seen with the boycott with Starbucks, it's working. Starbucks in the fourth quarter of 2023 lost $12 billion in profit because boycotts work. It is why 37 states in the United States have anti-BDS laws, which basically means that if you want to do business with any of those 37 states, you cannot boycott or ask them to ask the state to divest from companies that work with the state of Israel. So it's been proven that it works. And it's only through actions like this that we can make a change.
So divesting, protesting, educating, boycotting, giving your money where it matters. I know tonight we've raised $100 for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which is excellent. I love that. I love seeing folks do that. There are other great organizations out there. There are ways to take your money and put it where it needs to go.
Just be mindful of where you're putting your money and it's going to the right places.
There is an app that I have on my phone, and I believe it's available. I have an iPhone, but I believe it's available on Android as well. The app is called Buycott, Buycott, and basically what that does is different like campaigns that you can follow, and basically what you can do is say you're shopping in the grocery store, and I'll just use it as an example because I know that it should be boycotted, and you're unsure if Sabra Hummus supports the state of Israel, which they do, by the way, so boycott it. But what you can do is you can pick up a package of Sabra hummus, scan the barcode, and the Boycott app has a campaign specifically for Palestine, and if the product that you scan the barcode of conflicts with that campaign, it will not only tell you that it conflicts, but why. So the thing is with consumerism in the United States today is you buy a product, there could be 7 different companies before you get back to the one that supports Israel. And this app will show you that path. If you want to continue boycotting beyond the global strike, I would highly recommend that app.
Yeah. So just do what you can. I just want to make it clear to everyone. Do what you can. It's impossible to boycott everything they own because they own
if
a
you
lot.
did,
So do what you can, but we want to target specific ones at a time. And what we're targeting right now, that's a must, is Starbucks, McDonald's, and Disney. I know.
The Holy Trinity.
I know, Disney. Sorry. Find something else to show your kids. I don't know. Just figure it out. All right. McDonald's, Starbucks, and Disney. Those are the musts. If I see you there. And then on top of that, do whatever you can. But we're going to be targeting, a bunch at a time where they are musts, and do as much as you can, but don't be too hard on yourself. Oh my gosh, but I got to do that. Like there's so much. Just do the must, the 3, the trio.
Find things that are doable within your realm.
So maybe do the 3 and then add some for yourself that you're doing in addition to that. Right. And then add a little bit more and a little bit more. Don't, because it's a lot. It's overwhelming. They own a lot.
And
of
we were talking about the other night on TikTok, Nancy, if you truly wanted to boycott every single product of every single parent company, Yeah, you'd
Gotta
be
go to the
going back in
woods.
time 10,000 years and living a hunter-gatherer lifestyle.
We're going to the woods. We gotta fish. We gotta hunt. We gotta grow our food, collect rainwater, make our clothes out of leaves. I don't know. That's what we would have to do if we were to boycott everything they own. We can't do that. We got to do a step at a time. So we're gonna have the musts, the trio. Remember, McDonald's, Starbucks, Disney. Yes, Disney also. And then we'll move on from there. But add on to that whatever you want and seek out, this is my recommendation, seek out Palestinian owned businesses and support them. Palestinian owned businesses. They're out there, whether it's coffee shops. There's a couple of coffee shops here that are Palestinian owned and amazing, amazing. So much better than Starbucks. Ew, Starbucks what?
Starbucks, I don't know her.
And then, whatever, whether it's clothing, accessories, like there, you got to dig maybe. I mean, I don't have like a spreadsheet with Palestinian owned businesses. Maybe we should put one together. Maybe there's one out there, but just seek them out. And support them. Give them your money. Support them.
Yeah, and a lot of them, since October 7th, it's kind of a 2-for-1 too, because I know a lot of Palestinian-owned businesses, they're donating a portion, and some are donating 100% of their profit, have been donating 100% of their profits since October 7th to organizations like the PCRF. So you're not only supporting the business, but then if they're turning around and donating to an organization like the PCRF, you're kind of doing two good deeds in one.
Thanks, guys, for joining. As I like to say at every stream, with the right conditions, every human being can heal. You have the power to create those conditions. Thank you all for joining us. Signing off. This is Roll for Resilience. I'm a vector of change. Have a good night.